everyone. Welcome to the briefing. It's a busy Monday. Just a few quick updates at the top. I'm sure you've seen the plethora of statements from the Secretary today, as well as his press avail. As you know, in terms of a travel update, he's in Baghdad today, meeting with a variety of Iraqi leaders, underscoring our support for the Iraqis as they're going through this very difficult period, having a variety of conversations with a variety of people. So we've had that out today. Just one more thing at the top, or two quick things. The Secretary released a statement on the remaining removal of chemical weapons from Syria. All of the declared chemical weapons now are out of Syria. Obviously, there's still a process that we need to continue here, but that was the other statement. And then finally, one more quick item at the top, and we will be releasing a statement on this as well, but we welcome the decision by the Sudanese Appeals Court today to release Maryam Yahya Ibrahim Aishag from a Sudanese jail. Ms. Ibrahim was sentenced on May 15th to be flogged for adultery and to be hanged to death for apostasy because of her religious conversion to Christianity. As you know, the case has drawn the attention of the world, has been of deep concern to the United States government and to many Americans. We also, at this point, continue to urge Sudan to repeal its laws that are inconsistent with its 2005 interim constitution, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. These actions would help demonstrate to the Sudanese people that their government intends to respect their fundamental freedoms and universal human rights. And as you know, this is a case we raised quite frequently with the government there. And welcome to today's news. Matt.
I'm sure we'll get back to the Sudan situation in a minute, but I want to start with the one thing that you didn't mention, which is in Egypt. And the Secretary had some words about that.
Yes, we also did release a statement on that as well.
The White House also has said. I'm curious, though, did the Secretary, in fact, raise these cases yesterday, raise the case yesterday while he was in Egypt? And if he did, what did he say, and how did the Egyptians respond?
Well, a few points. I think the Secretary made very clear today our feelings on the case. As you know, this is a judicial process, but in his statement, he called on the Egyptian government to review the political sentences and verdicts pronounced and consider all available remedies, including, of course, pardons. As he said today, immediately upon hearing about the sentences, he called the foreign minister of Egypt to express our deep concerns. Yesterday, the topic, of course, came up in the context of our concerns about human rights, rule of law, these kind of sentences and convictions, of course. We know there's a judicial process here, but that's all put in place in the context of our larger concerns about human rights, and the Secretary made that very clear in his call today.
Right, but the human rights, the most recent human rights report says that your human rights, the State Department's human rights report says that Egyptian courts are susceptible to government influence. And I'm just wondering if the Secretary made clear his concerns about this case yesterday.
We've made clear for months our concerns about this case.
But I mean, but most recently,
and I'll double check on the conversations yesterday.
Before the verdict, the most recent communication with the Egyptians about this case was yesterday, right? With the second.
I will double check on that to see what the conversations look like.
I mean, it seems like if he did raise the case and express concerns about it, and given the fact that you guys do not believe that the Egyptian judiciary is free and independent of government influence, how is this anything other than just a slap in the face to you guys, particularly after you've given them, you went ahead and released additional assistance?
Well, let me double check again on the level of detail of conversations yesterday. I know the issue was broadly broached in terms of human rights and convictions, but let me check on that from yesterday. But setting that aside, hold on, let me finish. Setting that aside, I think you saw from the Secretary's statement today very strong language about how this process lacked fundamental norms of due process, is deeply disturbing setback to Egypt's transition. So I think he made very clear that injustices like this can't stand if Egypt has any chance of moving forward. Right. That being said, we do have a strategic partnership with Egypt that we think is important, but we will be very clear when we have deep concerns about what they've done.
So does that mean that there is no consequence for this?
Look, I think the Secretary made very clear our concerns about it, and we are constantly reevaluating our policy towards Egypt. based on what they do. Look, and what we've said is we need to see steps taken moving forward, and that as decisions are made by this government, we will evaluate them based on those decisions.
Well, so there isn't anything in the short term that you're aware of that you're going to do to express your displeasure other than the statements that the Secretary made?
Look, we're constantly reevaluating our policy, but to my knowledge, there's nothing specific that's being done today. But again, this all plays into the broader context of the space that we've seen, quite frankly, the shrinking space in Egypt for freedom of expression, for freedom of the press, which we've been very concerned about.
What is the status of the transfer of the 10 Apache helicopters that were supposed to go to the Egyptian military? Related to that, what is the overall status of the release of the $575 million in FMF funding?
The 572, I think, is what you're referring to. So that was recently obligated, as folks know. It was the result of continuing consultations with Congress. Those consultations are ongoing. Obviously, it wasn't time to coincide with anything other than our consultations with Congress. No updates on the Apaches. We're still working with the Hill. As you know, money's obligated, but obviously we have to keep working with Congress to get things moving. So I don't have any update for you on that.
Would it wouldn't it be reasonable to consider perhaps slowing down the process of transferring the delivery of the Apaches, or of actually making the funds available to the Egyptians for their military operations to show the U.S.'s displeasure with the verdict?
I think we were very clear about our displeasure with the verdict today, and as I said, we continually look at our policy towards Egypt and what our assistance will look like. There are many competing factors here. You heard the Secretary speak about them yesterday in his press avail. So we're constantly evaluating this, and we will make our displeasure known as we did today.
Does the U.S. Trust Egypt in light of these meetings which the Secretary had on Sunday? Mm-hmm. And he was, rather voluble, to use a word, about his conversations with both President Sisi and with Foreign Minister Shukri on Sunday. Does the U.S. feel that it can trust this new government?
Look, it's not about trust, Roz. It's not about trust in any relationship. It's about actions and what we see happening. And I think the Secretary made very clear in his statement today our deep concerns, and how we view these sentences and these convictions. I think that came through crystal clear today in his statement. Certainly, again, I think for him coming on the heels of his visit there, this was, I think, particularly tough news to take today, and we'll continue to make our displeasure known.
And one more,
One more on this.
Yeah, then I'll yield to Lena. Would it be fair to say that the Egyptian government is damaging its own credibility, not just with the American government, but with the international community, because President Sisi has promised a new start?
Well, I think that, again, going back to what the Secretary said, these kind of sentences, these kind of convictions fly in the face of everything that President Sisi told him yesterday, that he wanted to govern, in the way in which he wanted to govern. The Secretary said that today. I think that it's hard for people around the world to look at these sentences and these convictions and see that there's anything just about them, see that there's anything about them that is the kind of Egypt President El-Sisi has talked about going forward. So again, it's about actions. It's not about words. The Secretary had good meetings yesterday. These are important meetings. These are important discussions. We have a broad relationship with Egypt. But again, they've said they aspire to see their country advance in a certain way. Okay, we need to see actions back up those words. And again, we've called on the Egyptian government to review the sentences, to look at potential avenues, including pardons in this case. Mm-hmm. Yes.
These journalists were brought into the court for more than 12 times. Each time they go there, their trial gets postponed. Only hours after Secretary Kerry meets with Sisi and the foreign minister, although you've always expressed concern regarding the freedom of press and what's happening in Egypt, this verdict came only hours after the secretary left the country. What do you make of this, the timing?
I don't want to jump to any conclusions about the timing. As you know, there is a judicial process here, and as Matt mentioned, we have had concerns about the judicial process being politicized in the past. Certainly, we've expressed that. I don't want to jump to conclusions about timing. Again, I think the secretary made very clear that he had conversations yesterday with senior Egyptian leaders who talked about the kind of Egypt they want to build. Okay, this latest action, regardless of the timing or the reason, flies in the face of that. And it needs to not happen in the future, and they need to take steps to remedy it.
Why are you still considering increasing aid to Egypt? We understand that the aid that has been provided throughout the last year is the military aid that's necessary to guarantee the Camp David deal. And
let's talk about military. When we
so
talk about
you're talking about
counterterrorism-
enacting Congress to increase the aid to
Well-
Egypt and approve that budget, while you're just expressing concerns about all these major issues happening
Again,
there.
we have shared interest when it comes to counterterrorism, particularly in the Sinai. A lot of what we've provided in terms of assistance is for the counterterrorism fight in the Sinai, which also benefits the people of Egypt. Let's be clear about that. Also, assistance that doesn't go to the government, that benefits democracy programs in Egypt, that benefits average Egyptians trying to make their voices heard. So we have a broad strategic relationship with Egypt. We will make very clear when they have done things that we disagree with. And I think all you have to do is look at the last year, almost year now, since July 4th, and look at how our policy evolves in response to what the Egyptian government itself has done. We've been very clear that we're willing to take steps in response to what they do.
Just again on the Apache question, you say that the delivery is still being reviewed, it's still in process. Can you specify exactly what the status of those helicopters is?
I believe at this point in the process it's been obligated, but we're working with the Hill in terms of releasing funds and timing and all of that. I can check and see if there's more specifics though, Ross.
On Egypt, please.
Is it fair to say that the U.S. Egyptian relationship is of such strategic importance to the United States, both because of the peace treaty with Israel, privileged access for the U.S. military to the Suez Canal, and of course Egypt's status as the most populous Arab nation, that it really doesn't ultimately matter in terms of consequences what Egypt does on human rights, that the United States will continue to maintain the relationship for those three fairly significant strategic reasons.
I don't think those two things are mutually exclusive. I do think that, A, we will maintain a relationship with Egypt. Even when we suspended our assistance because of what happened last July, we maintained a relationship. It's really the nature of that relationship and the character of it and what it looks like. And that does change in response to the actions the government does or doesn't take, and that does include human rights.
And do you think it likely that the U.S. government will suspend additional aid deliveries or reduce amounts of aid given to Egypt in response to this particular instance or in response to the broader pattern of human rights abuses since July 4th?
I wouldn't want to guess, Arshad. I know we constantly look at our policy. I have no updates on that front or nothing to predict in terms of what we may or may not do.
So the secretary said when he was there yesterday that he was hopeful that the helicopters would arrive very soon. That suggests that the administration believes that it is a good idea and that for them to have the helicopters and that you are working
With Congress.
encouraging Congress to allow them to be transferred.
Yes, it's my understanding our position on that has not
Okay,
changed.
so even after something as egregious as this, and in the pattern, and fitting with a pattern that you say is horrible, you are still lobbying Congress to ramp up assistance to the Egyptian government.
Matt,
Is that correct?
well, take a step back though.
Well,
Our
that's
relationship,
correct,
well,
isn't
no,
it?
let me put it into context. Our relationship with Egypt is a complicated one and it's a broad one. And quite frankly, this is an egregious step. You saw the secretary make a comment on it today. We've also seen egregious steps over the past few months, right? With the hundreds of people sentenced to death, in absentia, most of them, without even having trials. There is a pattern here. We are working with the Egyptians to try and break it now that there's a new government in place. But again, these things aren't mutually exclusive. We can, on the one hand, express our displeasure, express our concern about human rights, and also say, but there is, at times, a shared interest to provide some assistance. It's not black and white.
Well, yeah, I mean, I understand what you're saying. I'm not
You just
sure
don't
it makes.
agree with it.
Well, I'm not sure. I just don't see how it makes any sense. This is a government that has been doing everything wrong in terms of allegedly one of your top highest priorities, which is the
Absolutely.
protection of human rights, and instead of punishing them or taking some step to show your displeasure other than just saying angry words, you're actually trying to get them more assistance.
Well, we
You're
do
trying
believe.
to reward them.
No, this isn't about a reward. This is about the fact that we have shared strategic interests. That the assistance we provide to them, all of that is done in service of those shared strategic interests. It's all where the United States national security interests lie.
So national
So there are
security.
competing national security interests. Human rights is one of them. Counterterrorism. There are all these competing interests, and what we do in Egypt and everywhere else is balance those interests.
Okay, well, why isn't it then fair for someone to take a look at this and say, well, in the battle of competing national security interests, human rights loses?
Because I think that's a very simplistic and black and white reading of the situation.
Well, but that's what it is. It's
Well,
I mean, it's.
Again,
Might be
I would
accurate.
fundamentally disagree with it. This is a
How-
complicated relationship, Matt. And to be fair, over the past year, we have changed our relationship with Egypt at times to a large extent, as you saw after July 4th.
Right.
So I think we've been very clear that we're willing to take steps, but you have to look at it from the broader perspective, what serves U.S. national security interests, and we do believe at this time our interests are served by maintaining an assistance relationship with Egypt while also pressing on human rights, while making clear that if they don't take certain steps,
Okay, but it's
we
not
will take
as if,
further action.
But it's not as if since July 4th, the bar graph has gone flat or down. If the U.S. assistance to Egypt after the initial penalty since July 4th
I mean,
has gone
We
up.
suspended assistance for quite a bit, and I'm not sure. Let me double check
But
on
as
that.
they-
But it's my understanding this was all pre-obligated.
Right,
this
right.
wasn't. We decided to do new things.
Well, I know, but
Right.
but the assistance is going up to
Well,
Egypt
no, it's been
as they
steady. It's been steady as we had.
flatlined.
Well, it's again. There's no new assistance, right? It's just issues that we or assistance that we had put on hold to look at after what happened last July 4th, and then moving forward with assistance as we deemed it in our security interest to do so.
Right. I guess I just don't understand what I mean, there seems to be no consequence at all here. I mean,
Again, this is a broad relationship, Matt, and there are a variety of levers that we have in terms of tools we can use to push the Egyptian government.
okay. Wait. Sorry. So, and now, and one of those would be aid, right?
One of them, but it's not the only one.
Okay,
and
well-
I think you saw the secretary very strongly come out today, and I don't have any predictions for what might happen next. There's a process in place. We've called on the Egyptian government to review these sentences. We've called on them to do things like considering pardons.
All right.
And I just don't have any
Is
more.
it your understanding that they're at least willing to consider
I
those?
quite
those steps?
frankly am not sure.
What was
We
the
would
sec-
we would encourage them to, obviously.
What was the Secretary's understanding of the legal process once he finished his meeting with President Sisi? Did President Sisi spell out for him
In terms of
is-
this case,
in terms of this case?
let me check and
other-
see if
yeah,
this case specifically came up in their
Yeah,
meeting. I'm
yeah.
not sure that it did.
because
I'm happy.
yeah,
Obviously, the
yeah.
broader issue came up of
Right.
convictions and sentences and detention.
And I'm asking because I'm
Didn't come
wondering.
up.
I said I'm
in-
not sure. I'm going to check our show.
Okay, no,
Yeah,
I thought
'cause
you
I-
had
'cause I
told Matt
wanted-
that it did come
I
up
said I know
earlier.
the issue generally came up yesterday, but let me check what meetings. He had a number of meetings, and I just need to check.
I'm asking in the context of the Secretary's statement and his comments at the press avail, suggesting look at all venues available to you,
Yes.
including pardons. And I'm wondering, did it come out of that conversation? Was that briefing that the Secretary might have had just
I'm
about
happy to check,
the
guys,
judicial
about what more
process?
happened on the ground, what meetings it came up in specifically, if any.
Mm-hmm.
I know, again, the broad issue came up, but I just want to get some facts from the team that's been on the ground. As you know, they've been working on Iraq today as well, so let me just see what I can get you. Let's just do one more on this.
One more in Egypt. Okay,
Yeah.
well, actually, it's about Al Azuli prison. It seems like the Egyptian government has this hidden prison where they torture the disappeared individuals. There are hundreds of them. They're being subjected to torture. It's a military jail called Al Azuli. Do you have anything on this?
I don't have any specifics. I'm happy to check with our team and see if we have anything. Yes, let's
Please.
move on. Yes.
If we start with John Kerry's visit to Baghdad.
Yes.
If you can just confirm if he is going to Kurdistan as well to meet the Kurdish leader.
I don't have any additional updates in terms of his travel. He did meet with Iraqi leaders today from across the political spectrum, including Prime Minister Maliki, Speaker Najafi, and Foreign Minister Zabari. If we have updates in the future, I'm happy to pass them on.
So, I just got back from Iraq yesterday. I went to Kurdistan. I went to near Mosul. Like, one thing that most really people you talk to, whether they're Kurds or Arabs, they don't understand what the United States is doing now. For example, okay, if you can tell me what Secretary of State John Kerry is trying to achieve
Yep. So
from meeting with Nouri Maliki.
Yep. In all of these meetings, he stressed the need for Iraqi leaders to understand the urgency of the situation, and that the responsibility is on their shoulders to act in a unified way. He emphasized that defending Iraq against ISIL in large part depends on their ability to form a government and to do it quickly. So that was one of the key takeaways that came from his meetings. You also saw the president, as we talked about last week, announcing some additional assistance as well.
Specifically, like he stated in his meeting with Egyptian foreign minister yesterday, that Iraq needs a leader that represents all Iraq's
Absolutely.
communities. Does that mean you believe, or the United States government believes, Maliki does not represent all the communities?
That's not what he's saying. He also said, I believe that we don't pick sides. We don't pick a leader. It's up for the Iraqi people to do that. As you know, there's a process for government formation now.
He also said that he notes
So
that
any leader needs to represent all Iraqis.
But he also said that he notes that the Kurds are dissatisfied, the Sunnis are dissatisfied, and some of the Shias are also dissatisfied.
That's right.
That means that he wants Maliki replaced.
That's not what he said at all. I think you're putting words in the secretary's mouth. What we have said is that Iraq needs a leader, all of its leaders, quite frankly, that represent all Iraqis, and that it's up for the process to play itself out here, as you know, and all of the parties, I think, have committed to the timetable to start government formation, I think, on the 1st when the Council of Representatives convenes, and the process will play itself out, but we don't support any one person.
But do you think Maliki, it seems to many people that the only way to solve this problem, if it can be solved, is to replace Maliki, because nobody wants him.
Again,
the Sunnis, the Kurds.
We've been very clear. Whoever the leader is, they need to represent all parties. I know that you're trying to push on this, and I know there's a lot of commentary out there about this, but we've been very clear that we will work with the leadership of Iraq, and all of Iraq's leaders need to govern in an inclusive way.
Just a couple more questions. What about the 300 military advisors and experts you've sent to Iraq? What is their job? What are they trying to achieve?
Well, a couple things. First, they're going to be advisors working with the Iraqis to help shore up their ability to fight ISIL. We're also going to be enhancing our intelligence sharing, including through joint operation centers to fuse information. We're going to continue to supply a steady stream of sophisticated munitions. And the advisors really be working with some of Iraq's best units to help them fight ISIL. Our support, I think, will be intense and sustained. And again, none of this will work if Iraq's leaders don't step up to the plate and realize this is a key moment to govern in a different way going forward.
But
yeah.
Last-
Wait,
sorry.
let's go to Matt.
Last one.
Just one more, because
One more, and then
I
I'm
want
going
to really be clear about this. Everybody knows that the United States military had been training Iraq for years with a much larger number of U.S. forces.
Yes.
Really nobody expects that with 300 people
It's
training
a very
for.
different time.
But what can they achieve if they?
Very different time.
Okay.
Very different threat.
What couldn't they achieve then? Why can they achieve it now?
Well,
From
again,
training Iraq.
a lot happened after the United States left Iraq. And as the president spoke to, I think now 2 weeks ago, maybe a week and a half ago, so much of what we've seen in terms of the lack of cohesion in the Iraqi armed forces has been because its leaders have failed to govern in an inclusive way and have really fomented sectarian divisions instead of doing the opposite. So these 300 advisors will be providing assistance and serving in an advisory role to some of Iraq's best units.
Will it be any different from the kind of assistant? Will it be any better in any way if you can concretely speaking about
It's a
it?
very different time. For more specifics on that, I'm happy to have my colleagues at the Defense Department help you out. Yes.
Last week, there were a bunch of questions posed to Jen about the immunity
Yep.
issue. It's my understanding, and I can't remember if this was said at the Pentagon or at the White House earlier, that immunity for the 300 who are not there yet, correct?
Correct. That's my understanding.
Is covered in a diplomatic note?
Yep,
Is
so
that-
I have a little bit on this. Let me give you what I have, and then I'm sure there will be follow-ups. So obviously the president has made clear that we need to address the status of any military personnel sent into Iraq. We can confirm that Iraq has provided acceptable assurances on the issue of protections for these personnel via the exchange of diplomatic note. Specifically, Iraq has committed itself to providing protections for our personnel equivalent to those provided to personnel who were in country before the crisis. And we believe these protections are adequate to the short-term assessment and advisory mission that our troops will be performing there.
Okay. Is this something, do you know when that arrived?
I can check. I'm sorry.
Was it last week or just over the weekend?
I'm happy to check.
In other words, was this an issue? Was this something that the secretary would have been
The
raising
secretary
today?
was really focused on the
No.
political steps forward in CT.
Okay.
Do you know how long it lasts?
I'm happy to check.
Does that mean that this is it? You guys are satisfied with this, and you're not going to seek anything more in the way of legal immunities.
We believe that these protections are adequate to what these 300 advisors will be doing. Yes.
Does this mean that any of those advisors could fall under the jurisdiction of Iraqi courts, or are they all kept outside of the Iraqi judicial system?
So without going into every specific in the DIP note, the protections are akin to those extended to diplomatic personnel. Our troops will have the legal protections they need to perform their mission. And again, they would, were something to arise, face due process for violations under the Uniform Code of Military Justice.
Well,
Who
thank you.
provided these protections?
The Iraqi government,
Yeah, but the prime
through
minister,
a DIP note.
the prime minister, the government, the
I'm
foreign
not sure who
minister.
signs diplomatic notes. I'm happy to see if there are more details. It's an official exchange of communications between our two governments, though.
Question about Kurdistan, please.
Is there anything else on this? Okay.
One,
yeah.
one more on this,
Uh-huh.
but does it need a parliament decision or a vote on this issue?
Well, as you know, the parliament, I think, won't be convening until the 1st. We are working with the Iraqis to determine whether, when a new COR is seated, its approval will be necessary. For now, we do believe we have the assurances we need, though.
On this, that means essentially that these 300 advisors, even though they don't have any diplomatic role, they're military advisors, are essentially covered under the Vienna Conventions?
Again,
Is that-
well, they're covered under the assurances given to us in a diplomatic note between our two governments.
Right, but you said
I said they're
akin
akin to what
to-
diplomatic person. I'm not going to go into all of the specifics in the diplomatic note that we exchanged, but again, akin to those.
Well, okay.
Okay.
Maybe we can talk about maybe we can get someone from the legal office. I'm a little confused
I don't need
as
someone
to how.
to explain to me what it says. There's just not a lot more we can
No,
share.
to explain to me.
Yeah, there's just not going to be a lot more we can share about this. We are confident in the assurances we've been given that our folks will have the legal protections
But
they need.
did you think that the assurances that they've given now could not have been extended in 2011?
Well, again, the situation now is different in character and kind than it was in 2011. This is a much smaller number of advisors, a clear Iraqi request for us, and appropriate assurances from the government. So it's just a very different situation. And again, the diplomatic note is what's covering
Okay.
this.
And did you guys specifically ask for this, or
we
did they
certainly
offer
asked.
it?
Well, I don't know where it originated, but we certainly needed assurances that our folks would have protections.
Why not make the nature of the assurances public? Why not do that?
Well,
What is the harm in that?
I'm not sure I don't know if there's harm in it. Again, this is a private diplomatic communication between our government and the government of Iraq. We and the United States military believe that these assurances are enough for our folks to be there. I'm happy to see if there's more details we can share. Again, I think this is just coming about fairly recently in terms of timing.
If you could ask the question of whether it could be made public so that people could actually see it and understand what it is, and therefore
see if
get the
there's more we can
reassurance
share.
that one might get from actually looking at a document.
Yep. I don't give that reassurance standing up here, Arshad.
I didn't say that.
Mary,
Going to you.
I know the U.S. has recently stepped up its,
And then I'm going back there.
its military assistance to Iraq. You just delivered the first F-16 jet and a lot of Hellfire missiles, rocket-firing helicopters. But you've sent all of these to the Iraqi army, Iraqi government. Well, you know, in Iraq there are two armies: the Peshmerga, which protects Kurdistan, and the Iraqi army. And the Peshmerga has increasingly come under attacks from ISIS recently. And I talked to the commanders there on the ground. They were telling me that they feel that they might be outgunned by the ISIS fighters because they have reportedly gotten their hands on American weaponry from Mosul and other parts of Iraq because they had belonged to the Iraqi army. So is there any plan that you might consider also arming the Peshmerga to
Well-
protect Kurdistan? Because there is no Iraqi soldier, there is no Iraqi police in Kurdistan.
Let me make a few points here. We do support the steps that have been taken between the federal government and the Kurdish regional government to cooperate on a security plan that will enhance both the Iraqi army and the Peshmerga's ability to hold positions and to confront ISIL. So they are actually working together on a common security plan here. We support.
They don't work together
Can I
in
finish
Kurdistan?
before you
Sure,
follow up?
yeah.
Thanks. We support the federal government of Iraq. That's who we have a relationship with. That's who we give assistance to. But again, we've encouraged the Kurds, particularly the Peshmerga, to work with the Iraqi army to fight this threat together.
But Peshmerga is, as you know, recognized by the Iraqi constitution as a regional guard, regional whatever army. And can't you work through that Iraqi constitution, respecting that constitution? Can't you also provide them with arms?
Again, we provide assistance to the government of Iraq and have been encouraged that the government is working with the Peshmerga to fight this threat together, and we think that's appropriate. Yes.
Thank you.
Poland.
Yes, thank
if
you,
I had
Marie.
to guess.
Marie, one of weekly magazines in Poland published audio tapes with conversations of high-ranking government officials, and on one of the tapes, a person identified as Polish Foreign Minister Radosław Sikorski is saying the Polish-American alliance isn't worth anything, is even harmful because it creates a false sense of security for Poland. So, is this true? What's your comment on this?
Well, I can't comment on alleged tapes. I can't confirm their authenticity or background. I'm just not in a position to verify that. But more broadly, the United States and Poland have an incredibly strong relationship. You saw recently the secretary certainly has been there, has been meeting, including with the foreign minister. And this is a relationship based on shared values. It remains strong. It's a key part of our alliances in that part of the world. And the crisis in Ukraine, I think, has made that even more the case, where we're confronting a shared threat together. So I can't comment on the authenticity of the tapes, but I know that the Secretary and the Foreign Minister have a very good relationship, and we'll continue to have one with Poland.
Are you still willing to work with Mr. Sikorski after
Absolutely.
comments like this?
Again, I can't verify the authenticity of these comments, but absolutely, we have a very strong relationship with the Foreign Minister.
In addition to the Secretary's visit, I believe the President was
yes,
actually there
yes,
not so
yes.
long ago.
At the same time.
Yeah, indeed. The question, though, is: are you aware of people hearing this kind of sentiment in conversations with Polish officials?
Not to my knowledge, no. As I said, I mean, quite frankly, we have a very strong relationship with Poland. Had a really good visit there at the President, as you mentioned, and the Secretary.
Regardless of whether it was Mr. Sikorski saying this on the tape or not, you would disagree with the comments of whoever
Absolutely.
was speaking.
Whoever said those comments.
Whoever said it was wrong, right? Can I ask you why?
Because we have a very strong relationship that's based on shared values. Again, I mentioned Ukraine. All you have to do is look at the crisis in Ukraine and how we're consulting and working with all of our allies, including Poland, to confront this threat together. So I think that just underscores how important NATO is, how important all of our partners are there.
So I better go to someone else because I can't
Lucas.
frame this question
Going
correctly.
back to ISIS for a second, earlier today in Baghdad, Secretary Kerry said that ISIL can't be tolerated in the region, and I was wondering why he didn't feel that way 3 years ago.
I don't know what you're referring to.
If he's saying that now ISIL cannot be tolerated in the region, now that ISIL has gone into Iraq, why didn't he feel the same way when they were operating freely in Syria?
I'm not sure what you're basing your comment that he didn't feel that way on. Do you have anything specific to ask about?
Well, he's saying that this is essentially Al-Qaeda in Iraq, and did he not think that it was Al-Qaeda in Syria as well?
Look, the Secretary and everybody has been very clear about the threat that's being posed by terrorists that have mostly started in Syria and have now bled over into Iraq. And the administration has been very clear about the threat posed by ISIL for years, for months and years. It was a key topic of conversation with Prime Minister Maliki when he was here last November. So I think any notion that the Secretary or anyone else here did not understand the threat is just false. I would say, though, we have seen the threat evolve. And what you've seen over the past few months is really ISIL gaining strength, ISIL gaining territory, which is why it's so imperative to get more assistance to Iraq.
Is there any regrets supporting Prime Minister Maliki these past few years?
Again, we work with the elected leader of Iraq, and we've been very clear that we will work with him, but we've also been clear when we have concerns about how he's governed. So, again, it's a relationship that we have had for some time now, and it's up to the Iraqis to pick their next leader.
Did the Secretary voice some of these concerns a few years ago when...
I think it's safe to say that many members of this administration, of course, Secretary was in the Senate then, have voiced these concerns and have had concerns about how the government of Iraq is governing. Yes.
So wait, can I go back to my Poland question?
Oh, yeah,
Because
and then I'm going to you next. Yes.
Unless they want to stay in Iraq.
No, go ahead.
Well, it's just that you say that Ukraine is the situation.
Just one example.
One example of this.
Afghanistan's another.
But using Ukraine as an example would seem to be problematic because the Russians have actually annexed Crimea.
But you asked what our relationship was based on, and
No,
I
I
said
know.
shared values and shared interests, and
Right.
finding a better path forward for Ukraine, where Russia is not able to do the kind of things we see them do, is a shared challenge we are confronting together.
Right, but my question wasn't about what the relationship with Poland was based on. It
That's
is why.
exactly what you asked.
No, it's not. I was asking why the person, whoever said these things, is wrong. And the person who said these things said that the relationship between Poland and the U.S. is worthless, and that it in fact can hurt because it creates a false sense of security. I didn't ask about whether there were shared values.
Well,
and I
but
don't
that's
think
why
that
he's wrong about the first part. Whoever this was on this tape, that it's
Right.
useless because we have shared interests and we are working to confront them together.
But shared interest doesn't mean that doesn't necessarily mean that that the relationship is worth anything, does it? I mean, that's the reason that there is a relationship. It doesn't add value.
Well, I
to
think
it.
you've
So-
also seen the president and the secretary talk quite a bit about reassurance of our allies since the situation in Ukraine, and we've taken
Right.
steps to shore them up. So that's when we talk about security of countries like Poland, we've taken concrete steps to say we will stand by our allies in the face of Russian aggression in this region. So
Well,
that would
right,
seem to be
except
worth
that-
something.
Well, yeah, but what you have done in response to what you claim as what you say is Russia's illegal annexation of
Absolutely.
Crimea is sanctions, which may or may not be having the desire. They certainly don't.
I think most economists
haven't-
would disagree with that notion. I think they've
They-
been pretty clear they are having an effect.
Well,
On the Russian economy, at least.
yeah, but they haven't had any effect on who runs Crimea.
Well, look.
Russia hasn't said, "Okay, Uncle,
Again,
enough.
Russia
We're going
has
to
a
pull out
decision.
of Crimea."
Russia has a decision to
because
make.
of
They
it.
can continue running their economy into the ground and hurting their own people, or they can take steps to uphold their obligations under international
But
law.
that's not my question, Marie. Marie, I'm trying to figure out why it is that the Poles should take heart from policy, from Ukraine being an example of the great value of a relationship with the United States and NATO, when the United States and NATO haven't done anything, at least effectively, to get the Russians out of Crimea.
I think we've taken a number of steps to reassure allies like Poland, including deploying detachments of U.S. planners to augment their capabilities, to reassure them of their security in the face of Russian aggression. I think we've taken a number of concrete steps in Poland and elsewhere.
Isn't one big difference in Poland and
Well,
Ukraine?
it's a
that
NATO
Poland's in
ally,
NATO
yes,
and
but-
Ukraine is not?
Absolutely.
Well,
But
fair
we are
enough, but-
confronting Russian aggression in Ukraine in part by reassuring our NATO allies and taking concrete steps to show them we will stand by them.
Okay. Do you know, is anyone from the embassy or this building trying to follow up to find out if, in fact, Mr. Sikorsky
I'm
said this
happy to
stuff?
check. I don't know. Yes. Just a little bit. Yes. We'll do one here and then we'll do a couple on Syria.
Well, thank you, Mary. This is Arshad, the other Arshad.
The other Arshad.
Well, question on Bangladesh. Recently the UN chief called for a dialogue between the two contending major parties, BNP and the Awami League. And this has been a matter of concern because things are going downhill as far as law and order situation is concerned, and the minority issue came up. So under the backdrop of this, and since Assistant Secretary of State last visit was in November, and since then she never paid a visit, so what is the current position of the United States on this situation? Are they still sticking for a dialogue?
Absolutely. Our position hasn't changed. I think the Assistant Secretary that you mentioned most recently spoke about this April 30th in a hearing up on the Hill, where she talked about the fact that Bangladesh continues to be an important partner to the United States, that we are encouraging dialogue between the parties, that we have consistently said this is the path forward here, and nothing about that has changed.
So is there any fresh election, specifically that dialogue would lead to a fresh election?
I don't have anything, I think, more to say on what we think should come of the dialogue. Obviously, it's up to all the parties to decide together.
Thank you.
Yes, Syria.
Regarding the Secretary's statement on the removal of the last
Yes.
of the chemical
8%,
materials.
The last 8%. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Declared.
Last
Yeah.
declared.
Yeah, and we made clear
Right.
that point in the statement.
So what happens next? Is the priority trying to destroy the production facilities? Is the focus on trying to get back to some sort of peace talks, if that's even feasible? Is it about simply trying to figure out another way of stopping the civil war? What's the priority for this administration?
Well, there's a number of priorities. One of them is destroying the chemicals that are now out of the country and that are on the ships. So obviously that's a process that will be done in a safe and environmentally responsible manner. So that's what comes next in terms of those chemicals. As you mentioned, yes, there are other things we still have to do, including destroying some of the production facilities. And again, everything is out of those facilities. It's just about destroying them. And also to continue to make sure that there are no other chemical weapons out there. So in terms of CW, that's sort of where we are right now. But again, this is a milestone, and I think a lot of people doubted whether we would ever get here. So I think it's significant to note. Look, in terms of the diplomatic side, we are where we have been, in that we believe there is no military solution, that we need the parties to get back to the table, but the Assad regime has shown itself wholly unwilling to do so. And we're not just going to have talks to have talks. So we will continue to support the opposition, to ramp up our support, as you heard the president talk about recently, and evaluate what happens next.
Are you providing military support to the Syrian opposition?
We've said we provide a wide range of support to both the Free Syrian Army and to the political side of the House as well, and that support will continue.
Secretary Kerry said that the U.S. is providing military support.
I don't have any more details on what he said, but we are providing a wide range of support.
Yeah, but why don't you confirm it?
He can confirm it for us. I don't have anything to add to what he said.
One more. Do you think it is possible that Syria has any chemical weapons or chemical weapon precursors that it failed to declare?
I think it's certainly possible. I think you saw that in the Secretary's statement today.
What, if anything, are you doing to try to neutralize or to prevent Syria from using those weapons if they exist?
Well, again, we don't know that they exist. And the OPCW has the lead on reviewing and verifying the accuracy of its declaration. So we'll continue supporting them, whether that's with intelligence or information. We will continue supporting them in that regard. But I think we've made very clear that there are consequences to use. And I think if you just look at the last however many months we've been working on getting these weapons out of the country, that is a significant milestone, that we were able to get what they've declared out of the country.
What consequence did Syria suffer for its having used chemical weapons?
That they have lost their entire declared stockpile of them.
Right, they voluntarily chose to give those
under
up.
Great international pressure brought on by the threat of American military
So your
strikes.
view is that their choice to give them up is a consequence?
Yes, absolutely. I do. Yes. Anything else?
Yeah. A lot. I'm kind of confused by that last answer, though,
Yep.
because I mean, this is a.
The Syrians had to forfeit a stockpile of weapons that, quite frankly, I think they had shown themselves absolutely willing and able to use.
Right.
That under great international pressure, including the threat of American air power, they had to be brought to the table to surrender them. So yes, I do think that getting rid of those chemical weapons is a good thing.
Okay, well, I don't think anyone can argue that it's not a good thing.
I'm sure
Now,
there are
whether
people willing to make that argument out there.
You think?
Really?
Really?
The arguments people make, the depths to which they will go, Matt,
Okay.
never ceases to amaze
All right,
me.
Assad is no closer to leaving power now than he was before August 20, before the chemical
But
weapons
that was
were
never
used,
going
right?
to be the goal of any military action at the time,
Okay.
regardless.
All right, can we go to Ukraine?
Can I make one analogy here, though? Your suggestion that that Syria voluntarily, albeit under pressure, choosing to give up its chemical weapons is a consequence that it suffered as a result of the use of chemical weapons is kind of like saying somebody takes a gun, shoots and kills somebody, and then under pressure gives up their gun. But the point is, they've given up their gun, but is that a punishment?
And that gun can never be used ever again to harm anyone else.
Yeah, but nobody's arguing that.
Yes,
So you
I think
it
that
is
the
a
Syrians
consequence?
gave up a weapon that they liked having in their arsenal and clearly showed themselves willing to use. Doesn't mean they don't have really other terrible weapons in their arsenal as well. I have time just for a couple more,
Ukraine?
and then I have to run. Sorry.
Ukraine?
Yes, let's do a few on Ukraine.
So the president and President Putin spoke today, according to the White House and according to the Kremlin. I won't ask you about that call unless you want to say more than what the White
think
House
I'll
already
punch
said
the
about
White
it.
House.
Okay, you've seen that the Russian, the separatists, the rebels in the east, have said that they will respect or that they plan to respect the ceasefire. I presume
We've
you
seen
think
those
this is
claims, but again, actions have to back up the words.
Will 4
Okay,
days make a difference?
I'm sorry?
Will 4 days make a difference?
Look, we would support any side taking steps to work towards a ceasefire. Obviously, we need to see those steps taken to support the words that we've now seen from President Putin and others.
But I'm not talking about what President Putin, I mean, President Putin has come out and said that he supports the
Yeah.
ceasefire
No, I
as
was
well, but
responding
he's
to your
also
question.
said that okay, so I'm talking about the separatists.
As I said, there are words out there. People
Right.
have spoken about
Okay.
supporting the ceasefire, but we haven't seen actions taken to back that up
Okay,
yet.
have you seen any, in terms of actions, what have you seen? Has it gotten worse?
Yes.
Has it gotten,
It has, in some respects. We have seen evidence of continued Russian military support to the separatists and a new ongoing buildup of Russian forces on the border.
okay, on Friday, there was discussion in here and in a conference call with a senior official about Russian tanks moving or having left, or they were being prepared at a site in southwest Russia, and then there were indications that some of them might have left that site. Is that
Yep, so...
still the case? Do you
Yep.
have they? Are you aware that they have gone into Ukraine?
Right, and as we said, I think last week on June 13th, Russia sent tanks from a deployment site in southwest Russia into eastern Ukraine, and we have information that additional tanks have been prepared for departure from the same site. On June 20th, the OSCE reported eyewitness accounts seeing a military convoy of unknown origin driving through Luhansk city. This convoy included tanks and armored personnel carriers. We also have ground photos from the destroyed BM-21 multiple rocket launchers in Luhansk that the launcher originally belonged to a Russian motorized rifle brigade. So there's a host of information that tanks, rocket launchers are crossing the border from Russia into Ukraine.
And all of this is post-Friday.
I can check on the timing.
One thing, I
Yeah.
had basically the same question, which was the briefer on the call couldn't confirm that any of the tanks that the U.S. government has information had left
Have crossed.
had actually crossed.
I'm happy to check and
Thank
see
you.
what the status of that is.
And is it still your understanding that reports in Russia of enormous amounts of refugee flows are incorrect?
Incorrect. Yes.
Okay.
Still our understanding. Sorry for the fire drill today, guys. That's it. Thank you. See you all
Fire
tomorrow.
drill.
Same
Is there-
place, same
Is there
time.
a fire drill?
It's a quick fire drill.
Is there?
No, I said I did a quick briefing.
Oh.
Matt's suddenly concerned about a fire drill.